So, welcome back, Grief Nation listeners, to another series. And I have a very special guest today, Elizabeth Hope Brown. And we're here in the series for A Woman on the Rise. Elizabeth Hope Brown is the director at the Housing Authority. In a previous role, she was a social worker at the Medical College of Georgia at Augusta's University Department of Psychiatry and Health Behavior. Elizabeth has worked in diverse social service communities. As a case manager, treatment navigator, she has served as an advocate to help individuals through medical and social service environments, removing related barriers of care while providing practical and emotional support. Elizabeth is the founder of Lyzzee's Hope, a nonprofit platform dedicated to inspiring women and building healthy families, and co-founder of Est.Fourteen publishing company. Brown is also an entrepreneur, self-published author of And on the Seventh Day She Rests, and sequel She Rests, Theophelia. Elizabeth is an empowerment speaker with over 20 years of community development experience, serving in faith-based communities, social services, communities, and schools. She is also the host of She Rests book club broadcast, inviting guests for all walks of life to share their stories to provide information on special topics. Hello, Elizabeth. How are you?
I am good. Very happy to be here with you on this morning.
Thank you so much for being here. Elizabeth and I was a part of the Black CEO National Conference, and we were on a panelist together, and that's how I was able to meet this beautiful young lady and all of the wonderful things that she's doing for our community. And so, Elizabeth, once again, welcome. Can you please share your journey of any life-altering change and or event that you have learned how to process your grief and emotions?
Unfortunate question. I was like, God, I've had so many in our family at such young ages that they really were transitional. I think the most traumatic and the most life-changing as a teenager, my sister and my cousin were in a very tragic accident. And I'm not going into details. It's not quite my story to tell, but it truly affected our entire family, the way that it came about and the way that it happened. I mean, media was involved, policy changes within the government, and much like advocacy with what you do with suicide prevention and gun violence, it had to do with drinking and driving. And so it just really shocked our family. And then also as a teenager and young adult, my grandparents all passed in their 60s of cancer. And at the time, to me, I thought they were of age to pass. I'm thinking 60s is old. Now that I'm older and I know that's actually quite young for all of my grandparents to die of different forms of cancer in their 60s. So the fear of turning 60 in my family, was very, very present. So a lot of us early on had to start thinking about the life goals and changes that were going to happen. And setting milestones of what did you really want out of life, because life is filled with swift transitions. And as early as my sister and cousin, I believe they were 18 and 19. I was about 16, so they had to be about 18 and 19 when that accident happened. My cousin passed, my sister survived, and then with the grandparents, I was in my teens and the young 20s when they all started passing away, grandparents and great grandparents. So the longevity in our family, having grandparents in their 80s, 90s, hundreds, now that I'm in the Southeast, it wasn't there. As an adult, these last 5 years, I've experienced grief and trauma in a different way. After nearly 20 years of marriage, I went through a divorce, and I better understand now why they compare the death of a loved one with the death of a lifestyle, because it was very traumatic. And then my oldest son I had prior to marriage, his father passed at 51. So definitely an unexpected transition for us. So each time those things happen, I think for me, I just had to really transition to, even though these deaths occurred or these tragedies occurred, to keep living. And then was even more assertive about living life even more abundant, because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. These deaths were not like, well, the cancerous deaths were long-term and terminal, but the other deaths were tragic. They were, today you're just fine, tomorrow you're gone. And with my sister and cousin for years, like when my cousin's birthday would come, I would still wake up having dreams as if she was still with us, just really transitioning that this person is no longer with us in body, on earth. So just really learn to set goals and celebrate milestones and doing things, even afraid. but finding a purpose and finding my need and knowing that if I don't do these things, I may not have another opportunity, to do these things, even if other people don't understand while I'm doing it. So definitely for me, pressing through and living life more abundantly through grief has helped me sustain my life and my lifestyle. Because a lot of times when those things happen, you just want to stop breathing too. And you want to just say, you know what, this right here too heavy for me, God. I need you to go ahead and just, because I've had those moments. It was just like, you know what, if I stop breathing today, it is okay, because this is just too much for me to bear. And especially when, not that I'm a perfect person, but when you're trying to live a life, when you're trying to do good by others, you're trying to help other people, you're trying to, stay clear of illegal, being a good citizen. You're trying to be a good citizen and a good person all around. And then these things still happen. It really makes you go into your inner self and say, okay, God, what's my purpose in this? Now, this didn't happen just for no reason. Why did you allow these things to happen? If you're a believer of sovereign things, nothing happens without his will and permissive will. So you say, okay, God, you're omniscient. You allow these things to happen in my life. So what is it am I supposed to be getting from this? Because it's starting to feel a little unbalanced and unfair. So
Absolutely. Now you talked about a very, very life-altering event that happens to a lot of people, a very detrimental to our spirit of losing a relationship when it's in divorce,
right.
I should say. And a lot of people sometimes don't even feel like, why are you still grieving? Or didn't that happen, some time ago? But
Right.
like you said, that was a lifetime long event of 20 years. And how
Right.
did you just be able to move through that? Were
Right.
there any unforeseen signs or challenges in which you shared with our listeners about all of the losses, but particularly in divorce, that others could actually understand if there's any similarities or to the same adversities that they may be having because of a separation or a divorce?
Um, well, to start off with the first one, like as a teenager to watch another teenager pass away, that's very difficult because as teenagers, you think you're going to live forever. You don't think nothing like that would happen. So I think that if I was talking to my teenage self, I would say, still be cautious in your doings. You never know what tomorrow may bring. And it was one of those situations where they're going to the store. My little nephew, who's 2, was crying because they left him. It was my other little cousin's birthday. My sister was scheduled to go get induced for her second child. So it was so many life things happening on that same day that, it was just, like I said, it was very traumatic for the whole family all around. So even as teens, like, don't live your life as it was that YOLO, they say, you only live once, still be very cautious, because when these things happen, it doesn't just happen to your life. It happens to your parents. It happens to your grandparents. It happens to your siblings. I'll never forget coming to the hospital and seeing my auntie. I mean, just totally just crying and crying. And then going into the ER to see my sister, who still didn't know my cousin had passed. I mean, I'm just right now, I haven't talked about this in so many years, my goodness. But she was like, me and my posse, because they used to call each other posse, and just like, no one's told her that my cousin didn't make it. And so I think for these young people, just realizing, and it wasn't even just, and they were not at fault. Even people who are practicing dangerous behavior. If you have habits and substance abuse issues or whatever, you're not just hurting yourself. You're putting everything and everyone in the community around you at risk now. And then there's very long-term effects of it. I've raised my kids with those fears. Be careful when you drive. You're not driving just for yourself. And this is something that happened nearly 30 years ago, with 30 plus years ago now. With the grandparents, it was different because I watched them go back to feeble stages. If you ever seen anyone die or pass away with cancer or any long-term terminal illness, and to watch my mother bathe and take care of my grandmother, calling her pretty girl, it was just really difficult. Now, as my mother's daughter, watching her take care of her mother, and she never wanted it to be a situation where someone found my grandmother by herself. So she moved her in the home with her, and then her and her siblings would rotate. But it was her primary care, her passion, and her choice to make sure my grandmother was taken care of 24 hours out of the day until she passed. And they were all surrounded with her. I was at the park when she took her last breath. So I think that for some people, for that transition, it was different because they saw her take her last breath and see how life happens, and how to value every breath that you take today. Just as sure as you're breathing, that's a blessing, because everyone's not going to get another breath after that. And then with the divorce, I married a young preacher, started preaching when he was 19. He became a pastor. So there was no signs that you could have told me that we were going to be divorced. Now, there was trauma and incidents within the marriage. Yes. Was it a happy situation? Absolutely not. It was traumatic for me, him, and the kids. But with the faith that we were practicing and with the and at the level that we were practicing it, you're talking this grand preaching, prolific preacher, well sought out, and this boisterous, aggressive, what do you call it, we were the progressive type of ministry. So I'm empowering women, but then me empowering other women became more of a you being a feminist, and I'm like, no, we're preaching for everybody to become the greatest version of themselves, not just the patriarchal side, but everybody's daring to be who God created and purposed them to be. But with traditional settings, we talked a little bit about that before, that's what they're saying, but in essence, that's not what's being practiced. So it caused conflict. And so it was very hurtful and detrimental, because early in the marriage, we were that, we're going to evangelize, we're going to travel the world. When the kids retire, we're going to get an RV and go from city to city, and save souls. And then, the older we got, the more political it got, the more degrees that were earned and the more accolades achieved. Those things we talked about early on were forgotten. And all of a sudden, I'm like out here by myself, like, hey, I thought we were doing one thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You done jumped on board with the scribes and Pharisees. Like, what happened?
Right. Wow.
So that for me probably was more detrimental, because then after the divorce, the last 5 years was, okay, my older son graduated college. Are you coming or not? Then my younger son graduated from high school. Are you going to be there or not? My daughter has her first pageant. You still got fundraising events and stuff. And our co-parenting didn't work out. We got divorced like in March. The next month and a half, he got remarried. We didn't even know you were engaged. So my kids and I didn't even know, like these transitions were taking place. So it was really difficult for us because it was so many unknowns. So, when someone passed away, you go to the wake and stuff because you can see the body. This is your last time. With divorce, how do you mourn the living? Because this is not like it's someone who's no longer attainable to you. They're choosing not to keep their word. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah.
That one was more difficult to grieve through for me in divorce, because it's more delusional. You're trying to, first of all, convince yourself, did we really just get divorced? And then why do we get divorced? And what happened to all the love and the romance and the promises? This is not a God, it's God allowed, but it's not like a natural event. It's not an accident. It's not a drowning. It's a choice. People are making decisions at this point. And some decisions are not being made with consideration to the other person, the children, the community, the people in the church who's watching you, the community of people who's respecting you, and I'm telling you already, this is the most I've talked about this.
You know what? It's so perfect, because all I kept seeing is, and I know we're going to get to the business of the business that you do,
right.
everything that you have outside of, your work life, but also your entrepreneurship. We're going to dive into that. But I just keep seeing or feeling or wanting to ask. I know you have an empowerment organization where you empower women. Is a piece of that dedicated to women in ministry?
Okay, so it is. So that's what I'm saying. It all linked together. So
I can see that this is what this is for.
Right. So, but I'm gonna say from the beginning, was the word, and the word was God. From the beginning, before I was yet in my mother's womb, God ordained all of this, and He knew it would happen. Because when I looked at the questions and the timelines, I went back to, so as I'm the pastor's wife, first lady, I'm teaching Sunday school, I'm empowering women, I'm doing women's classes, youth Friday night lives. And I was sending out daily text devotional messages. And one of the young ladies, Victoria Ford, she sent me a message and she said, Miss Brown, have you ever thought about doing Facebook? Now, mind you, at this time, to me, like, Facebook is demonic social media. My kids and I weren't allowed to do it. That's just too much information. It's messy. And so, Lizzy's Hope was launched because it was a free platform. At this time, now we aging ourselves. When you had cell phone plans and family plans, you got limited text messages.
Right.
And if you start going over, you start using your spouse or your kids or whoever's on that plan's minutes. So they wanted me to keep sending the daily devotionals, but they didn't want me using up their minutes and their text data plan. They didn't want me using up the data plan. Just so happened, I'm watching one of the news stations, and Facebook had just launched the public pages where you can create a business page. And on the business page, you don't have friend requests or nothing like that. It's basically for marketing. You post that people can like it, share it, comment it. You're telling them about your nonprofit or you're telling them about your business, and it's not personal. So Lyzzee's Hope got started as a nonprofit platform dedicated to my grandma Lyzee. And my grandmother, when she got, it was so ironic, in 2000, she passed of lung cancer. And when she got sick, to her final time that she got sick, found out later on she had several appointments and she knew she had cancer prior to telling us that she knew she had cancer. You know how that goes.
Yeah.
She called me one day and she said, I hope I'm sick. I need you to come pick me up. And I'm like, Grandma, like, and then she says, don't tell your mom. Hold on. Like, you put me in a predicament. So,
Right.
but that generation, they're
Yeah.
not going to be burdensome. They don't tell like
Yeah.
this generation now, everything you in the ER with your emergency room, I'm in the hospital on Facebook. Like that generation just didn't do all that. But she called me and she said, don't tell your mom. So I get to the hospital and at this point they give me all of my grandmother's belongings and they come out and they say, is there anyone that you want to call? The cancer has progressed. I'm like, huh? So I'm at the emergency room by myself with my grandmother and I called my mom and I was like, Mom, grandma called me and said she was sick and they said she got cancer. Like by that time I said, well, Mama, she told me don't tell you. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
It's just me and grandma at this point, and my grandmother and I, we were close, but I didn't realize we were that kind of close to where she put me in this predicament. But she saw something in me. And one of the things when we left the house, she had those old school address books that kind of had the Velcro and you open it up when we used to actually write down addresses. She handed me her address book. She handed me her billfold or her billfold,
Yeah.
and it had her ID and her information and stuff. And she told me that she wanted me to write her story. Well, I have yet to write a biographical story about my grandmother. Sixth grade was when I first said I was going to write a book. We had this school project and we had construction paper and cardboard boxes and we bound a book together. And I say I became an author then at sixth grade, but it took nearly 30 years for me to publish my first book. And when I initially thought to do it, I wanted to petition to my family and say, Grandma asked me to write her story. If the six of us write our story, we could do it that way and it'd be easiest. Well, again, in our people of color and cultures, nobody wanted to do that. I mean, because we have some real traumatic things that we're still dealing with and processing individually. And everybody's not like me. They're not ready, and they may never be ready, and that's fine. So they made it more challenging. So then as a social worker, I worked in psychiatry and behavioral health for 4 years. I've been doing public service work for over 25 years. And so I had to create stories without looking like I was de-identifying family members, which made it more harder because I could have easily told their stories and just changed their names, but out of respect and love to my family, I didn't do it that way. So, there's some things in there. Definitely you see tidbits of me and my kids like, oh, Mom, at first I thought you were talking about this person, but then they kept reading. So I'm human. So there are some things that is like, I can't take this out because it didn't even just happen to you at this point, doing social work and believing in the Bible and reading God's word. There's nothing new under the sun. And sometimes you think you're the only person that have gone through this, but if we were more transparent and had more platforms like these early on, you'll learn you're not the first, you're not going to be the last, and you don't need to be in this silo going through it by yourself. Other people have experienced some form of what you've gone through, and you all can help each other along the way.
I
So
truly believe that Grandma Lyzee just showed up and she had her way today,
yeah.
because she has truly transitioned this
Yeah, so
our
yeah,
questioning.
that's how I came
So
about. Grandma said tell her story. So Lyzzee's Hope was born in 2013, and I was still married at the time, but it rolled so much friction, I think, in my former spouse, and he didn't know where it was going. And you just a feminist? I'm like, what? Like the whole goal, like you don't even know the conversations that I had as a child with God. You don't even know the conversations that I had with Grandma Lyzee. This has nothing to do with you. This has nothing to do with the church. Now you got the deacons and the trustees. She talking too much. She empowering people too much. It's like, you acting like you the pastor. No, I'm acting like I'm Elizabeth Hope Brown doing the will of God, doing the will of my grandmother, so.
So how did the women that was a part of, everything that you were pouring into them, how, that was also a living death for them too. Now
That
that's
was the problem. So
yeah.
that was the problem.
What
They were
happened with that?
receptive.
Did they?
So
Oh
I
God.
started Sunday school class. We were going to it. We were attending the church. He started pastoring the church. We were at a mega church, and he went and answered the call to pastor a smaller church. And it was a smaller church where the members, it was a dying church, and we were resurrecting the church, resuscitating the church. And I remember it was so many things he asked me to do, like, Elizabeth, I need you just to do this until I get somebody else to do it. It was probably 20, 25 active members coming to church at that point. The church grew in 3 years from like 20 active people to about 500 people coming.
Wow.
My Sunday school class, we split it, the men and women. We started off with like maybe 9 women, and then it grew to like 10, then it was 20, and then I think we got up to like 45 women actively coming, which was a problem. they growing. You know, the men's class only had so many
Oh,
the women's class had more. Then we in there having pre-church. And so then they was like, y'all be late all the time, you know, for Sunday school.
well, yeah, we do that.
So we were thriving, you know.
Yeah,
We was having church within the church, but it was never with the idea of we're
Yeah.
going to overthrow the men or we don't need the pastor. It was in my mind, that's not what I was doing. But later on, after divorce, after everything else, I can see that's how it was being perceived. And a lot of people think that my marriage trouble had to do with infidelity and all this. That stuff came up later on as an egotistic response to more of a spiritual battle.
Mhm.
So maturity, you know, we started ministry young. We were 20 and 22 when we got married, you know, leading churches, preaching to 60-year-olds, and we 20 and 22 years old, teaching Sunday school, you know, people, you know, 20, 30 years older than us, because it's a gifted leadership. It's not something that you can teach to people. It's a calling.
Yeah.
So Lyzzee's Hope got started in 2013, and then that was a nonprofit platform to empower women. And I started a girls scholarship, memorial scholarship fund in my grandmother's name. So in a way, I'm telling her story, but I'm not just telling grandma's story. I'm telling all of our story. And so from that, when I wrote the first book, the author page is developed because I didn't want to exploit the Lyzzee's Hope page and turn it into a for-profit page. So the author page was established because I do sell books, I do sell merch and products, and I'm a believer of keeping things separate. You know, the Lyzzee's Hope is about empowering, encouraging, helping people through the grieving process, helping people through life transitions, building healthy families. Healthy families talk about difficult conversations.
Yeah.
Healthy families talk about illness in the family. Healthy families talk about mental health. Healthy families talk about generational curses. So when my kids and I went through a divorce process, they understood mama did some things wrong, daddy did some things wrong. When you all get into this situation, maybe you can avoid some of the things that we went through, you know, if these things happen.
Yeah.
So that's where you'll see the hashtag building healthy families on Lyzzee's Hope. And then you'll see raising the Joshua generation for persons that are Bible based or even read the Bible as literature. The story about the Moses generation, they had to wander for 400 years, was it 40 years in the wilderness before they can go to the promised land. Moses was disobedient. He hit the rock. So he still had to finish the mission, but he couldn't go into the promised land. So when I say I'm raising the Joshua generation as divorced from a pastor, as a divorced pastor's wife, your dad and I fell off. We didn't do some things correctly. God is still going to bless us and keep his promises and bless our children and our children's children. But we're not going to get rewarded for some of the things of the promised land. But the Joshua generation, my children and my children's children, they will. So you don't get to say, well, I messed up, God ain't gonna forgive me, or my life ain't gonna be better because these things happen. No, you keep working, because now you're working so that your children can be rewarded and they can inherit the good credit. They can inherit the happier life. They can inherit the marriage until death do us part. We did better than our parents. Our parents weren't married no 20 years. My mom didn't marry until after she had all her kids, you know. So
Right. So throughout that process, what was the greatest teacher in that, you would think?
Submission to life will. The greatest teacher for me has been, you cannot control everything. I've always been, you know, they said the onset adult ADD or OCD or whatever acronym you want to put with it. But I've always liked to do things structured. Growing up in school, I've always had good grades. I've always been good in sports. So things really came natural for me. So I always thought that if you just do what the teacher said do, you won't get in trouble. If you just do this and that, you're going to be great at it. So you go into adult life thinking you really are controlling these things, not realizing that God is allowing things to happen for you. And then as you get humbled through life's processes and grief experiences and death and divorce, you realize you're really not in control. And whatever's going to happen is going to be. And so you learn that you have control over some things, but you don't have control over all things. So for me, pressing through the process has been submission to the fact that you can't control life. You can try as you may, but understand that you're limited within your control. So that don't take away ownership and accountability. You have a role to play, but the role is not in your power. You know, people can make choices for themselves. As a social worker, that was the most difficult lesson. You're not the expert of people. People are the expert of themselves. They do what they want to do for themselves. And until they feel like they need to make a change or they deserve something different, you can't force that upon them. You can make yourself available to them. So when they're ready to transition, that, you know, you can. So, and that's hard because you see people hurting. You see people lacking. You see remedies to where I can help you fix that credit. I can help you get out that domestic violence situation. I can help your kid get a scholarship for college. But until that's something that they want to do, you're working in vain.
Absolutely. Oh, I totally agree.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things to always say is you have the opportunity and the grace enough to decide and to
Right.
make choices to choose, what you want to do in life to better
Right.
yourself and to move
Right.
forward. Um, let's talk about some things that kind of happened last year a little bit and how that shifted, just everyone's mental health, which was during the pandemic. So let's talk a little bit about that. And why do you feel that talking about mental health matter? And you did speak on that a little bit, but I want to dive a little bit more into it.
Mental health matters because I used to always tell people, especially like in the faith-based community or even children in school. I used to teach middle school for 7 years. Sometimes you're making decisions as insurance policies for the future because you never know what really may happen. When the pandemic hit, I know my prayer life and a lot of things I set up financially, it sustained me because I always started thinking once a few things happened early on in life, I started planning just in case. So just in case this does happen, I did have some insurance prayers and some insurance budget and some insurance mindset that, okay, it's time just to be still. It's time for us just to kind of calm our anxiety, see what's going to happen next. How long is these vaccines going to take place? This is not the time to do. I'm a doer. I think I'm supposed to be working and doing something all the time, but there's a time to be still. To everything, there's a season. That was what we started in 2016 about She Rests. Sometimes we're working even with the best of intentions and you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're doing too much. So I just took the pandemic on as a piggybacking to everything that I've done from Lyzzee's Hope to publishing the first book and on the 7th day She Rests and starting the She Rest journey. It all complements and piggybacks on one another. So when the pandemic hit, first it was a be still season just to get some rest. Maybe this is God's way of just sitting you down because I was getting really overworked again. I had so many trips planned and so many things that I want to do. A third book I'm trying to launch and publish. And so my first inclination was just to be still, get some rest, calm my nerves. Still very optimistic. March, April, May, June, still, I was posting weekly, telling everybody, okay, you can't go to the shop, but back in the day, we washed our own hair. You know what I mean? Like posting pictures weekly of me curling my own hair. I had the little foot spas, do your own feet. We don't got so spoiled, take things for granted. You can't, what you are depending on other people for. A lot of us got out of taking care of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
cooking your own meals. So, but then by about June, July, all the propaganda with politics, all the mistruths, all the false leads, people starting to get discouraged now.
Mm-hmm.
Your reserve money getting low, your tendencies. Like I was used to traveling. Now I'm going through withdrawals. Like the sun is out. People
Yeah.
wanting to go back outside. It was a little different in March because it was still kind of cold and stuff.
Yeah.
The time hadn't changed. But now we want to be liberated. And I think now we're starting to feel trapped. And so for me, mentally, it was getting to be a little overwhelming. Then my royalty checks from my book stopped. And then it was like, okay, maybe if you do a couple lives, you can start reconnecting because connectivity is important for
Mm-hmm.
health.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you need me time to yourself, but sometimes you need to be able to connect to people. And this is where virtual world really saved, I think, a lot of us
Yeah.
because I started the She Rest broadcast. I said I would do it a couple of times just to see what would happen,
Yeah.
And then the more I did it, the more people started reaching out. And the more I was again reminded that you're not the only one going through this. And especially for those of us that are used to being in positions of leadership, used to encouraging other people, used to telling other people it's going to be all right. They're not calling you, telling you the same thing because they're so dependent on you being the leader. Who's calling the leader?
Yeah.
you know. So then it was like how we ended up with Black and Iconic. It was like I saw it was like, okay, I need to yoke up with some people stronger than me. And where am I going to find these people? So the presumption was, whoa, they all, they the gurus and I'm the low person at the totem pole. But even with that experience, as we expressed, the more we all start talking to one another, even with all our degrees and accolades and experience, we
Right.
we are we are all still at bay level trying to figure this thing out. So
Absolutely.
I'm really grateful that we connected and we shared a platform and we were panelists talking about, Black Woman Confidential and some of the confidences that we've had, with one another that not confidential and private, but confident in saying that we could talk about these things and we gonna still get through these things. Talking about it don't mean we're not gonna survive it and thrive through it. Talking about it don't make it more real. Whether you talk about it or not, it's real. That's what
Yeah,
you need
yeah,
to get out of. Not talking about it don't make it not real.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, talking about it don't exploit it. It makes it get you to that place where you can start healing through it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm so glad that in 2016, when we started this, She Rest Journey, and published that first book, and it's a 7-book sequel. Originally, I was going to just write a big book, just letting it all out. Just, people need to talk about all this stuff. And it was like, no, that's not how you do that, because it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
people need to get used to having these conversations, not making them be stigmatic and taboo, making it be normal that you're talking about these things, because so many generations and so many years before them, even prior to divorce, we had different times of separation. And I remember my grandmother, before she passed, she said, baby, you young people, a woman ought never leave her husband. And I'm like, grandma, it was homicide or suicide. Somebody had to leave. And that was that was like the first 5 years, but we toughed it out, because everyone's
Yeah.
telling you, you don't do this, you don't leave.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if we had more support, more transparency, and more people telling us, okay, but if we're going to stay, then help us how to stay peaceably. We
Right.
can't keep living like this.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, they're staying together, but they're not staying together peaceably. And
Yeah.
I always said from the beginning, I will not be married and miserable. That's not living. I'm not going to be in a
Absolutely.
situation where I'm walking on eggshells, or I can't thrive to be the best version of myself, because it's going to provoke your insecurities, and just like being the kids celebrate you, we need to be celebrated too. So it has to be a mutual relationship where all parties are becoming the greatest version of themselves, not one person denying who they're supposed, because that's a grievous situation
Oh,
too.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
You,
absolutely.
yeah. So, but yes, ma'am.
Because it dives all into so many different things, like self-acceptance and, am I good enough? Because,
Right.
you won't allow me to be, and it just turns into so many different things. So,
And we went through all of that. It was
yeah,
like from the beginning, I'm verbal, I'm bold, I'm gonna
yeah,
speak my truth, I'm gonna ask questions. But then as we get deeper and deeper into the marriage, it's like, well, don't talk so much, don't be so loud, don't be so,
yeah,
like, so much trying to convert and change me from being who I am. And it's like, that's the greatest version of me. And who I am in private is helping you become the greatest version of you. So
yeah.
my
And then you're
boldness, my
becoming a little
tenacity, my
controlling.
resilience, right? I'm helping you be great. But when
Yeah,
it comes to helping me be great, then it's a
yeah,
problem,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
uh
And then that's making, then that's turning turning him into this controlling, egotistical, being that, that's not of God. You know what I'm saying? So how, yeah, okay. Well, we're just going to leave that there and put a pin in that. And then I want to go back to the She Rest experience, because I definitely want people to understand what that whole volume is about, and about your publishing company. But I want to also ask, it's so amazing how when you speak and you talk about, you're, on this totem, I don't see you as that. I mean, you're like way up here to me. So, it's like, what is she talking about? Anyway, yeah, we got to stop doing that to ourselves, because you got it together, sister. And
Thank you.
not only on paper, you're actually doing the work. So you have learned how to manage your career, your business effortlessly. I must say, I feel. Share what it takes of being first a director, which is huge, and also being the founder of Lizzy's Hope, and how you're, doing all of that.
It all complements one another. As I said, God has been so good to me. I can't even tell it all. You have me shouting and tearing up this whole Zoom broadcast, because the way it's happened, where people think they're stopping something. And I'm not going to say my former spouse was a bad person, but it was instigated and encouraged by other people too. What you going to do with her? That's not how first ladies act. She's supposed to be a pastor's wife. So, you really got to be strong and flat footed and know who you are when it comes into these situations. And then when there's power and money and all of that, it's not just as simple as that, so it's not to demonize anybody, and that's not what I'm going to do. Even if that's what other people do, that's not what I'm going to do. But I will say that you have to know who you are going into it. And so when you go into situations like that, you find balance, because you know who you are. So one of the most devastating things for me was, I love the platform that I was on. And so when the threat becomes, only reason why you're doing this is because you're with me, or because you're married to me, and these are the privileges that come with it. Yes, it came with privileges, but it wasn't about the privilege of the title. It was about the opportunity to serve.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so when we got divorced, my first job was in psychiatry and behavioral health. And I was like, oh my, because I had quit my job, my other nonprofit platforms I was doing with my children in the community to support developing this ministry. And so I'm like, why you want to do this now after I don't give up everything to help you do this? But this is how good God is. He gave me a job in a place where now one thing I did that I encourage everybody to do is I finished my education, and I didn't use my degree for several years, but I always tell people death, disability, and divorce can happen. And divorce, I never thought about, but if people take sick or an accident happen on the job and you lose that spouse or something, you can't predict these kind of things, but you want to have yourself in a position to where you can still maintain your household. So that was always part of my Sunday school platform, the 3Ds, and the three people you don't want to owe is child support, IRS, and student loan people, because they're going to get their money. But that's a whole nother, and that's grief is too, if you owe them three people. But anyway, that's a whole nother grief if your money ain't right.
Right.
So, but I balance them because so while I'm healing and processing, it was a grant. I'm telling you, every job I got didn't exist until I needed it. Let me tell you how it worked. So the MCG Medical College, very prestigious research institute, university here in Augusta, they had got this grant called She Prevails. And it was for women of color who were at high risk for HIV for several different reasons, not to go into deep details. And so it almost was like a new affirmative action where I got the position because I was a Black woman, but it was okay because I was a case manager for this grant program. And so while I was healing, I was learning all of these training principles and applications. That was my first time being in the publication. I was going to college campuses and stuff, and I'm presenting. But as I'm helping others, I'm also healing myself. See, so a lot of times when you're going through stuff, you think you're going through it for you, and I'm sure you can testify to this, but you're also in preparation for helping other people. So one time, Nikki Burns, she's the executive administrative assistant, she said, "Girl, God must really trust you." And I'm like, what you mean? She's like, you go through so many things, and the way you handle them, God gives you more. I'm like, look at here, God, you ain't gotta keep trusting me, because this is
I feel you on that.
But
yes.
It's like you've been rewarded for your good stewardship, but I ain't feeling rewarded right now.
Right.
I'm broke, I'm in debt, I'm left in debt, I'm doing payday loans. I mean, like totally put on the mask and shades. I'm embarrassed. I'm this pastor's wife having to get in more debt. And so he blessed me in the job with psychiatry, behavioral health. I was able to help, several women. And then I got comfortable. And then it was like, you're doing case management, but now I have more for you to do. And it was so weird because everything that I was doing as a social worker, a degree that I had gotten 10 years prior, I was already doing it in the church for free. Now I'm doing it on the job with a salary and benefit coverage for my kids. And we were never lacking. We were never homeless. I never had to live with nobody. Didn't have to get no welfare, no WIC, no food stamps, nothing. Not that I ain't above it, because I tried. I went down there thinking I'm a single Black mom with 3 kids now. They said no. And God has made a way, like every day. That's why I said I get so full, because he said, that's not where you are. Don't think like that. You're thinking where you were. This is not where I have you. I got you set up. You got to trust me on this one. And so when people think they're in control of your life and your destiny, that's why you got to go back to your inner person, your spiritual self, your whatever you want to call it, because everything you need is already in you. We get blinded by the grief, by the death, by the loss of the relationship, and we forget who we are and what we're supposed to do. So that grant ended. I'm like, God, we back here again. I'm back unemployed. Like, what am I supposed to be doing now? And so I found another position, and it was working with persons with disabilities and ADD, certified. I had to get all these federal background checks. Now I'm worried about people stealing my name, because as he transitioned, it was with people who had criminal records and stuff. And I'm like, Lord, I hope ain't nobody try to steal my ID, because I work in governmental sectors and I can't have my name messed up. But I was on this job for a year, and a job for a director position came up on the job, because I was working helping people find employment. And I was like, this is weird, because these type of jobs don't come through like this.
Yeah.
On the job, I applied for the job, and I got the job as a director. And so my tragedy turned out to be God putting pressure on me to really increase my territory. So I went from, helping 45 women in the Sunday school class to ministering to women at 4 different sites in psychiatry and behavioral health, to now being a director of a nationwide youth build program throughout the United States. And then when the pandemic hit, I'm ready to get my $600 a week, thinking that they're going to close the program. I was offered another position in a department that didn't exist, to create a resident services director position to help not only the kids that were in the youth build program, but now over 200 residents at one site, 100 plus residents at another site. So now I have families of nearly 1,000 persons that I have stewardship over, helping them find social services and programs to help them through the grieving process, to help them through the pandemic. How
Yes.
do I balance it? It all complements itself. So while I'm simultaneously building healthy families with Lyzee's Hope, I'm selling books with the She Rest Journey, and I'm working on the job day to day, finding social services and resources. So I still get to be me in everything that I do. So it's not like I have to deny.
And this is the lady, you guys, that said she was low on the totem pole. Now, did y'all just get what? Girl, I'm done. I cannot. No, ma'am. We are not accepting that.
No, when I say that, it's because it's not. I don't take
You
credit
are
for it. I say that.
amazing.
It's not
Even
like
how
I
you
thought
share the
out.
story. I mean, even how you tell it. So, I mean, it's just like, blah, 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 you know, it just rolls off your tongue because, like you said, you know who you are. And every walk, every trial, God just slid you even in, just even more cleaner, you know, with your all white head to toe on, just sliding you on in there, girl.
He had to, because I started forgetting who I am. And he reminds me, like, have you forgotten what I told you? And who I told you you were? Right. So
whose you were, first of all.
It begot whose you were. Like when it got to that point, especially with divorce, it was like, what are you willing to give up for peace? And it was like, God, I give up anything. And I take all this stuff. And it really was where I lived, the 5 bedrooms, the 3 bathrooms, the luxury SUV, the Mercedes Benz. I give me my little Nissan beep beep and we roll. You know what I mean? So it was going back to the buy. When I told you I was in the negative, to the buy here, pay here lot, buying a cash car to get my kids back and forth to college, to now, you know, no car payment and just debt free. It's crazy. Like I said, 5 years later, I'm just like, but wow. God, you know, and discipline.
I got chills. I feel like I'm at a sermon, like I'm at the church. I mean, you're so empowering, and I definitely can see how Lyzee Hope has expanded, because if you're talking to your constituents and your women and your clients or whatever you're calling them, you know.
It started in the Sunday school class, literally. It literally started in the
Sunday school class.
Still coming
through.
And it came through, through the clinic, working in psychiatry and behavior health, and then expanded through the community and the schools, and now through the housing authority. And so I'm so humbled and grateful, because I serve people and they look at me and, you know, one time, Miss Brown, you just bougie. You don't know. You just up. And I'm like, you don't know my story. So you don't know why I'm able help you, sitting here flat-footed. You don't scare me. Calm down. First of all, oh, Miss Brown, well, I got a bad temper. Okay, I got one too. I ain't take my medication. That, you know, like they're saying this stuff, trying to fear me, and it scares them, the fact that I'm not scared, and they don't understand why. It's like, you don't know the places and spaces I've dwelled.
Right, absolutely.
God put me here to help you. I'm not gonna beg nobody to be no blessing.
That's right.
You're gonna calm down and receive this blessing, or you can leave and just come back when you're ready. You know, it's like, I need you to get out your feelings, because emotions don't do that.
You're amazing.
I done cried many tears, and I'm telling you, that's all it is. It's a cry moment. But now you got to go back to plan of action. Now we gonna cry. I'm gonna give you a minute. Now what we gonna do?
Now let's go into this She Rest experience. Now, you have talked about She Rest. I want people to really understand what it is and how you transition from. Were you already a publisher first, or did you became an author? No. Talk about that whole transition and how that happened.
Okay, so divorce happened, finalized 2015, and I told you I'm broke. I'm looking for money. I was gonna go to the grocery store, apply for Kroger. Like, I have no shame at this point. For me and my kids, to do what I gotta do. Told me I can't get no welfare food stamps because you got a job. Okay, that's fine. So I wrote the first book because I went back to, where were you at 16, before husband, before kids? What did you want out of your life? What were your goals and aspirations? And one of them I did accomplish. I graduated college. I went and got 2 degrees, my associates and bachelor's. And so I said, that was when I was still married, though. I was determined I was going to finish that, because I was in college when I got married. And before I said I do, that's what I'm saying. Going into these relationships, people, have your standard. And even if you fall off, go back to what you originally said. Because I always said, can we wait to get married till after I finish school? Oh, no. I mean, we got married right now. I'm not going to try to stop you from school. Then we get married, and every time I try to take a test, it's a fight. You know what I'm saying? Right. So, yeah. But I had already finished my education, so I used my degree. I stopped looking for jobs, because first I was so despondent about looking for work. I was looking for jobs, I ain't gonna say beneath me, but jobs that I was overqualified for, because I'm just looking for work. You know, that's when I looked at the university, got a job with benefits and a salary, and then to supplement my income, I started writing the book. And so initially, I thought I was gonna write a book about myself. Then I thought about my grandmother. Then I published the first book, and I had found a publishing company online, and they were talking about self-publish your book, 100% of the proceeds belong to you. Long story short, it just, the way God created me and my intuition and it just didn't sound right. And so I inboxed 3 people that had written books, and you know how people can be. One person never responded. One person, they tell you what they want to tell you, but they too ashamed to tell you about their failures or whatever, not knowing you really could bless another person. A third person called me, and she actually published work. And I think normally she would have tried to recruit me, but because of who I am, she didn't even try. She was just like, I tell you what, Miss Brown, as long as you do this, this and that, you make sure that's how it's self-published. Then I went to the library, and yeah, a lot of people still don't know public libraries are real, very, very resourceful. And it just so happened that God be blessing me. The person who was a regional director, who was like, she had a pen name and she was like a bestseller and all this stuff. She just so happened to be there for a district meeting, and she was on the 3rd floor. And they told me where she was, and I went up there. I had an elevator speech moment with her, told her where I was in my process. And she said, and I had already paid a deposit. I'm broke. They said you pay off in 12 months. And she said, you need to get your deposit back. She said, how long did it take you to write your book? And I said, I don't really know, because for 20 years, I kept saying I was going to write a book. She said, however long it took you to write that book, when you finally decided to write it, give yourself that much time to figure out how to self-publish it. And then whatever you can't figure out for yourself, then you pay somebody to do it. And sure enough, I was 2 days shy of my 30-day deposit to get my money back. And when I called the company and was telling them I wanted the money back, it's like, well, of course they were trying to talk to me. Is there something they could do to change my mind? And then finally, no questions asked. They just sent it back to me. And so then I went into self-publishing and did it myself. And it wasn't to become a publisher for other people. Right now, I only publish my work, but it's self-published because you have to have a publishing company in place when you upload and publish your book. So that's how the self-publishing came into play. But I had aspired to be a writer, and all of this again was in March of 2015, because that's Women's History Month. So you had these milestones in life where you want to do stuff at a certain time. And that happened, and I was able to self-publish it. And
now, how many books are within this the She Rests? Is it what are you
calling?
There will be 7 complete. Or is it a what are you naming?
There will be 7 books complete. The first book is on the 7th day she rests.
Okay.
There's 6 characters introduced in the first book, 5 adult women, 1 teenage girl, and then there'll be 6 sequels. It'll be a spinoff from the first book. Each character will have what happens next story, but the genres will be different. I write realistic fiction, but like the second novel was She Rests Theophelia. She definitely was the most cynical in the first book, but she has some romance genre in her book, and she does at 180, and she changed her perspective of life, and She Rests is not only a physical rest, it's a physical rest. I mean, a figurative rest, in that you're laying to rest situations. You're not forgetting that loved one that you lost, but you have to lay to rest that grieving process. You have to process differently so you can continue to live life. There's a reason why you're still here. You have to find that reason and that purpose. You can't just stay there with it. When the divorce happened, I couldn't just stop there. There was a reason why these things happened. So figuratively, I had to lay to rest that relationship goals that I thought we had in place. Now, over time and during seasons like 2020, when my daughter graduated high school, you got to remember, psychologically, you're still going through now. I'm an empty nester. And the plan initially when she was born was, when Corey graduates in 2020, this is back in 2002, we're going to do all these things, and you're single. So not only am I empty nester, but now I'm a divorced empty nester, which was never, the plan of action. So with the She Rests journey in the sequels, we'll show how the women go through the process of trying to do things in spite of the fact that these things in life did happen differently than they anticipated. So there's some humor in there, some very candid conversation in there, some very transparent conversation in there. But everyone that has read it, both male and female, both teenagers and adults, have read it, and they can identify with each of the characters, or at least one of the characters, and it's very real. It's realistic fiction.
I think that is so amazing. I just really wanted everybody to understand that, that the series of it and how you were able to piece all that together. That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it's a collaboration of everything that we said, and it's 2 books are live and ready. Book 3 is on the way. And then I tell people too, that's the vision. It will be a 7-book series. There's 7 chapters in each book. There's 6 characters fictional. The reader is the 7th character. So that way you're connected and you're a part of the journey. But I also am very realistic that I don't rush myself to just put something out there and say I'm the author of 20 books. That's why book 3 is not live yet. And I always say, if it's for me to write the 7 books, then I will, but the journey may not be for me to complete. My granddaughter might write the other 3 books. Right. So embrace the first 2, jump on the
absolutely.
journey. I think book 3 is on the way. I also have a manuscript that I'm doing because I have a workshop coming up on the 20th about how to self-publish in the process of writing your first book. So that'll be published as a manuscript, but it's not a part of the She Rich journey, but it is. Okay. It's the 7 steps of basic publishing. So,
now, are there other organizations or affiliations that you partner with that are important for you to talk about?
Now, Cove Companies is my daughter and I, we co-founded Est.Fourteen. She's actually my book cover model, one of my book editors, and she tag teams with me and makes sure that everything that I'm doing is cohesive. But she actually is an IT major at Augusta University. She graduated with honors. You see her over there. Graduated with honors from A.R. Johnson Magnet Engineering pathway at a magnet school, and she actually got her associate's degree in computer science at the same time. So at that stage of the game, and so she has started her digital design business, Cove Companies, and she actually does all of our she keeps me virtual. She does our website design. She helped me transition during the pandemic because, like I said, I got really down and despondent about the inactivity, worried about the women that were on the journey with me and the connectivity. And so she really helps undergird that. And then if you see some of my accessories, my eyeshadow I have on today, Cove Cosmetics. So my daughter, Cove Companies, she's definitely a sister company of Est.Fourteen, which is our publishing company, which is a subsidiary of author Elizabeth Hope Brown. So yeah, we just bring it all in there together.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my goodness, that is brilliant. Okay. That is brilliant. So let's also
we're doing lineage, honey. We're doing generational wealth, and it's not accidental. I used to do economics program for a year for myself to really learn tax deductions and how to learn how to standardize my taxes and my travel and my business supplies. So yeah, me and Uncle Sam got a very good understanding. So I'm at peace with life right now.
A lot of us, a lot of different things about a woman on the rise and in business. So thank you for sharing that.
The She Rich journey is more than books. I mean, the books is the heart of it. Lizzy's Hope is actually the real foundation of it all. But we talk about everything. Healthy families is not just everybody loving and kissing and getting along. Is how are you managing your finances? How are you managing controversy? How are you communicating love? Because sometimes we need to learn how to better communicate love. How do we receive compliments? How do we handle controversial issues? So
let's go. So let's go back into that. You've been a social service community in the community for many years. So share your expertise of how others needing supportive services should navigate into that process to gain access.
For anything is ask questions. Whether you want to start a small business, whether you want to be a book author, whether you are in a dying out situation, this is not the time for pride. You have to ask questions. And if people don't know what's going on with you, they don't know. We're not mind readers, and we're not called to be mind readers. And a lot of times, part of asking for help is admitting that you need help. So especially for women of color, getting out of this phase of, girl, how you doing? Girl, I'm doing good. How you doing? That's not the standard answer anymore. You know what? I'm here. Today is the day. You know, I thank you for asking, Miami. I've had better days, but we're going to get through this. We need to be more transparent in our response because you don't know what my resources are. And even if I can't help you directly, you don't know who I know. So I am that person that in social services, in business, in family, and in life, if people ask me about something, I'm honest to say I don't know. I do tell you what I do know, because what I know, I know. I'm flat-footed about what I know. What I don't know, I'm humble in saying I don't know. And then, but I don't stop there. We're going to find out who does know, though. You know, because somebody who knows somebody know. Because once again, it goes back to what I said in the beginning. There's nothing new under the sun. And what you're going through, somebody else has gone through it too. Might not be the same exact situation, may not be in the same manner, but some version of what you're going through, you got to put the pieces together. You know, like it's referenced in the Bible again about having one body and many functions. Everybody's not going to be the expert at everything. And so what Miami is great at, I'm not going to be great at. That's why I need Miami to undergird and help me. And that's what I say, bearing one another's burdens and being my sister's keeper, because you cannot do this journey alone. There's no way. And when people say, ain't nobody never helped me, I did it on my own. No, you didn't. You might not have acknowledged your help. You might not even realize your help. You may not want to, accept the fact that you're doing it on your own. But when someone is saying that, that's a lie. And the truth ain't in them, because it's not possible. Whether it was a stranger, friend, or foe, someone has to help you on this journey. And you have to make those needs be known. So that's always my encouragement to everybody on every platform that I'm on. You got to get to that place of boldness and humbleness, because sometimes it ain't even about being scared. You got pride, or people don't told you, or them false truths passed down from family generations. I was on a call earlier with a family member I've yet to meet from my granddaddy side of the family, from Ancestry.com. Like, we got to start taking these truths to the grave. People are hurting. People are looking for answers, and they shouldn't have to go to Ancestry.com and Facebook and Instagram to find them. That's not the way to do things.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if we just open up and have that and allow ourselves to have those communications, and even if they're confrontational, still we need to talk about it. I think a lot of times the stuff that our family has held in, it truly ends up hurting us even worse. And it turns into generational, because we're still not talking about it and still not talking about it. And then you're wondering why little John is over there acting out because of some things that we could have shared with him, and just being open about, our past and also things that happened. I'm so glad that you were on here and you really shared a lot about your grandparents and their journeys, and the false hopes and all of those things, because a lot of times I think even when I start working with a lot of the women that I empower and I support them, they're still leaving behind, or leaving on the table, or not sharing what's beneath the surface that really has disturbed them for so long. If it's past traumas, if it's, things that they experienced early on in childhood, if it's something that happened within relationships, or if it's those insecurities that most of the time our family give us.
And when you say we, that includes us too. I was my oldest son, he was a year when I got with my former spouse, and for years, that was dad, and so as he got older, we had a real debate on when are we going to tell him that, you're not dad. And my former, he's like, I'm his daddy, he don't need to know. And it's like, no, we're not doing this. No, he needs to know. And I love the love and the spirit that he had behind it, and the intent and motive, but I knew that wasn't healthy just from time past, from my own parental, situation, from my grandparents. My grandmother, for years, we thought my grandmother was just depressed and in denial, because she used to always say she didn't remember getting a divorce. And I'm like, oh, grandma just still in love with granddaddy, yada yada. Do you know when she died and I found the paperwork, she never did get a divorce. He remarried several times, but she never.
Oh, but that happened a lot back in then, because of
and when it was time to file Social Security, they don't forget you ain't got divorced.
Yeah, you're right. It'll come back now. Maybe you
But for years, she was made to look like she was just a bitter, broken-hearted woman who didn't want to accept the fact that he moved on and he left her. And it was like Grandma Lyzee was telling the truth that whole time, And then the family that I'm going to meet in June, that we never thought Uncle had a child. They thought he was childless. And then when you see the picture of him and my grandfather, it's like, nah, he ain't childless. And he got plenty children.
But let me tell you, since you were talking about Ancestry.com, that's how I learned a lot about, when I started diving into ancestral healing and getting to understand what that was, and getting to know, building the connections with my ancestors and who they were and the time frame of things that happened. And that's how I ended up finding about in my family that we were a part of the turpentine industry, because of doing the research on Ancestry.com, and also just kept diving into it and talking to relatives. I was able to find out, how he even died, which he was risen from a tree, and a tree fell on him. But extracting this resin from the tree was what they sold to the turpentine industry for saps and, things to heal. And with me understanding that and learning that, and through some of the shamanism work that I do, I was able to actually connect with the spirit of my great-great-grandmother, which was his wife, and in understanding she was a medicine woman. And I went on this whole journey and actual shamanism journey is what I want to say. I went into this deep trance is what I'm saying. I went into this deep trance, was able to actually witness and see all the healing that she did. And that was what had also came down for me, that I am this medicine woman. I am here to help people heal, not only in the instance of, curing wounds, but it's in a different wound. It's a different type of wound work that I'm doing, but I'm still the same medicine woman that was in a past life long time ago, which was an ancestor of mine. But I was able to determine and understand all that by doing, of course, the work that I do with shamanism, but also going back to understanding my family's history. Ancestral healing is such an amazing piece and part of what this is exactly what you're doing. It's just
when you said that before about how you were named and how your father named you, and sitting out by the ocean and going back to Miami and everything that you're saying, no matter your spiritual belief, no matter how you practice your belief, we are all interconnected. I believe in spiritual transference. I believe in DNA. You said something earlier. When I taught middle school, I used to tell them parents, stop telling people, I don't know why he act like that at school. You know why. You know who you have a child with. You know how his mom and daddy act. You know how your mom and daddy act. If we stop acting like we don't know why this child is cutting up in school, the child is not going to heal. And we have to stop denying those kind of things. And the thing for me is I have a very loving family and a very close family on both my mom and dad's side. And we've all accomplished so many wonderful things. But I just can't imagine, like, had we not dealt with some of this other stuff, how much more stuff could we have accomplished? How many more degrees have we could have attained? How much more land could we have purchased? How much more money we could have, stored up had we communicated, these things and communicated. And understandably, I hold no fault to them. Times are different. So as every generation goes higher and higher, as we share this information, as we pass down this knowledge, it's so that that Joshua generation can be even greater. So I hold no fault to them as far as, what they did. I don't hold no judgment to them. I'll say it like that. I understand they did what they did at the time that they thought was best. But as each generation has more accessibility to more resources, more accessibility to greatness, God is restoring us. And if we're not sharing those experiences and sharing that non-tangible wealth of knowledge and information and experiences, because every time we survive one thing, it empowers us to grow another thing. And those natural resources that we have to pass along. Like me, I talk fast. People say I talk funny. I talk deep. And my grandmother used to always say, my grandma Lyzee would say, oh, that's that Geechee in you. And I'm like, what is she talking about? I grew up in Sacramento. So I'm like, what is she talking about? It wasn't until I'm grown, moved back to Georgia, was a part of a church ministry that did a Gullah Geechee tour in South Carolina, that I was like, this is what my grandma Lyzee was talking about. It's like Geechee is actually a culture of people.
Yes, they are.
I never knew that. And it's a really, sad story too about the different heirs property and things that were lost, culturally speaking. But those are the kind of things that I'm talking about that have to be passed on, knowing about your culture, knowing who your grandparents are.
Okay, so that was a great segue. I'm going to do a couple of things here. Let's talk about best qualities of becoming a woman on the rise. What are some best qualities to have?
Character still matters. I think a lot of people, have misassociated titles, organizations, affiliations with character. And I disagree. Your character matter. I don't care what organization, what church, whatever community association you have on your resume. How you treat people still matters. How you talk to people still matters. Your word is still bond. No call is the worst call if you told someone you're going to follow up with them. Basic human kindness is still very much a factor to me. Now, in addition to character and human kindness, I'm a lifelong learner. Never think that you know more than you need to know. And even if you at the doctoral degree, PhD level in something, you can still be back at the certification level in something else, because life is ever changing. Resources and, supplies are always ever changing. And then life may shift and you may have to be an expert in something completely new that you didn't anticipate. So I think being open-minded to being a lifelong learner will definitely help you stay on the rise, and diversifying the company that you keep. I have traveled out the country over 10 times and been to 29 states, and it's not a culture of people that I preference. I'm a proud Black woman. My cousin keeps giving me all these, ethnic things to share with you all. Unapologetically Black, and walk in the room, exactly what I am. Ain't no question about it. However, I have some great friends of different races that I have been networking with that have blessed me personally, have been at my weddings, my kids, events, have been with me in times of crisis. And so I think that there are racial tensions very much still prevalent in this world, but I don't want that to restrict people to thinking that all people from all cultures are any kind of way. Let people be who they are. Get to know them for yourself. And then once they, once they show you who they are, believe them. I can be naive at times. I'm the one to be like, oh my God, I can't believe, especially in the Southeast, that blatant racism is still very prevalent. But I don't let that turn me off from other people, because you need allies on both sides. Absolutely. And we would still be in slavery if we didn't have allies on both sides. We would still have a lot of discriminatory practices if we didn't have allies on both sides.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about your self-care. What you do for yourself, girl? What do you do to take care of you and all things that you have to balance?
Yeah. So self-care, I will say, warning to those of us who are maintaining households, husbands, children, because I did fall off. I had many years in there that I did not prioritize self. And when things were happening with me, whether it was dentistry work that needed to be done and I'd be in pain during the winter time, and or just like I need to fill and replace, and I took too long to get it done because I want to make sure the kids had school clothes, and it turned into a root canal. Denying myself for way too long, not taking those sister girl trips, or not taking trips for myself, or just taking myself out to dinner. It's really okay. I am a person, I do patronize the spa. I bought me an in-home sauna. During the pandemic, I didn't stop my self-care. I gave myself pedicures. I will go get a pedicure done. But it's not even just prioritizing to do these things, but also doing them without guilt or shame. Let me start there. And then making sure that you're able to do it. So some people are doing like, girl, I work hard, I deserve it, but you're not taking care of your household. You're not taking care of your bills. You're misappropriating funds. That's not self-care. That's mismanagement, because later on that's going to come back on you and it's going to hurt. Or depending on other people to take care of the responsibilities while you fluff, and enjoy your life. So self-care is important, but I think we need to be practical with our self-care. We need to be responsible with our self-care, but we also need to prioritize it. So whether it's a pedicure, whether it's a massage, whether it's self-care, pampering your own self, because I can do both. Can't nobody love on me better than I can. And I had to learn that over the years. Whether it's how I speak to myself, how I, massage my own feet, or pay somebody else to do it, Right. Either way, I'm going to make sure now that I feel good about it. And then self-care is also surrounding yourself around people who respect and care for you as well. So, you can care for yourself all you want, but if you allow toxic people in your space, that energy does transfer. And it's just as if you've done nothing at all.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing all of that. That exactly what we all need to hear. So what's next for your journey? What you have coming up?
We are maintaining on the She Rest journey. I think God has relaunched so many things going into 2021, showing that same resilience and tenacity, through the childhood experiences of family traumas, and through the adult, divorces and grievances. Right now I'm at a place where I'm not going to say I'm just on the hamster's wheel, but I'm maintaining, I'm working on the book series. We're continuing the She Rest journey. If you're not already on the journey, go ahead and get book 1 and 2, join the journey. If you're not already inspired with Lizzy's Hope, go ahead and follow that page. That's just affirmations and confirmations. A lot of things you already know. You just need to hear it from someone else. And then as a director, I'm in research mode, because with the pandemic, there are so many changes in policy right now. Biden's having something tonight at 8, so we don't really still know administratively how this is going to affect the most vulnerable populations and marginalized communities. So we're kind of still in a waiting period this first quarter of the year. But just taking it day by day, staying informed, staying researched, and then and learning to shut it down. Some days I learn to log off, and I don't have any alerts on my phones on purpose. So when it's time for me to get to work, I go to work, but I'm not all day constantly worried about what tomorrow is going to bring. I have no control over it.
Absolutely. But you have an upcoming event. Talk about that for us.
Lunch and Learn workshop. It is, again, I mentioned earlier, for persons who are either first-time authors, are looking to self-publish, even if you may have published your first book, but you are looking to publish your second book yourself, or just so you can make more informed decisions and questions to ask of the person that is publishing for you. The workshop will definitely benefit you. If you're not a book author, if you're not looking to self-publish, but you have a small business, it will benefit you as well. In addition to talk about publishing a book, we talk about networking, branding, marketing, investing in yourself, what things you need to look into investing in yourself. Like we talked about banking, getting your EIN number, your tax deductions. We really go into all of that within 2-hour span. It is an informative lunch and learn, casual, informative, and it's interactive. I'm not just the expert. I will go first into sharing information, but it will be interactive, and there will be time for Q&A. So if you have an expert that you want to bring, expertise that you want to bring into the conversation, we welcome that as well. Author Elizabeth Hope Brown Facebook page. You can also go to Instagram. My handle is Elizabeth Hope Brown, or you can go to our website at Est.Fourteen41publishing.com. It's all inclusive. You can go to that page, find out about the authors, the founders, the events that we have coming up, the workshop that I just mentioned. It's a one-stop shop for all things.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And how can everyone reach you?
You can reach me on You can reach me on Facebook on my author Elizabeth Hope Brown Facebook page. You can also go to Instagram. My handle is Elizabeth Hope Brown, or you can go to our website at Est.Publishing.com. It's all inclusive. You can go to that page, find out about the authors, the founders, the events that we have coming up, the workshop that I just mentioned. It's a one-stop shop for all things. So you can catch me on Facebook, author Elizabeth Hope Brown, Instagram, Elizabeth Hope Brown, or just go to our webpage, Est1441publishing.com.
Thank you so much. And before I let you go, I always love to ask my featured guests about your call to action. Or is there anything or something that we didn't discuss that you'd like to see change or bring further awareness to?
For a call to action, well, today I didn't realize I have on my shirt. I will use my breath to speak for those who can't breathe. I think giving a voice to the voiceless is the call of action of the She Rest journey, and really empowering people to be inspired to share their story. So my call to action is share your story. Whatever platforms that are available to you, or if a platform you need to create, the stories need to be told. And I think not only for yourself and your healing process, but also to those that need you and are waiting for you to share your story.
All right. Thank you so much, Elizabeth Hope Brown, for coming to It's the Miami Night Show Grief Show to share your story, your journey, and all the wealth of knowledge that you have poured into our spirits today. Thank you so much, sister. I really appreciate you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed this today.
Absolutely.
Well, there you have it, Grief Nation listeners, and thank you for tuning in to another transformative segment on It's the Miami Night Show Grief Talk. Today, we give thanks filled with love and gratitude to our special guests for expressing your very unique grief journey and sharing ways of understanding the healing process. This is your girl, Miami Night, with much love and light until we connect again spiritually. Bye-bye.
Slow-mo. He's got me walking that grief walk. Going slow-mo. He's got me talking that grief talk. Going slow-mo. He's got me clocking the way.
It's the Miami Night Show.
Hey, yeah. Slow-mo.
He's got me walking that grief walk.
Going slow-mo.
He's got me talking that grief talk.
Going slow-mo.
He's got me clocking the way.
What up, tribe? It's Miami Night Show Master Grief Coach. Welcome to the Miami Night Show. He got me walking that grief walk. It's time for Grief Talk, y'all.
I talk about things you think about.
It's Miami Night Show Master Grief Coach.